In this talk, I like presenting my ongoing research on the expression of prospective aspect in German. And I would like presenting the results of a corpus study on the syntactic expression of this aspectual notion. And the central research question I like to answer is which types of eventualities are licensed within the prospective construction? And to give you a brief overview on the structure of the talk. So I begin with a very brief introduction to the notion of prospective aspect. Then I turn to its syntactic realization in German, and especially to a brief discussion of allied verb constructions. And the main part of the talk consists in a presentation of a corpus study and its results. So the notion of prospective aspect is used, for example, by Comrie for an aspectual form which is somehow the mirror image of the perfect aspect. So this aspectual form denotes a state which precedes a subsequent situation. And a similar characterization of the perspective is expressed by Klein, who states that the topic time includes utterance time and is in the situation's pre-time. So it's also locating something in a pre-time of some other situation. In the literature, this form is often called, well, sometimes also called proximative, for example, by Kuteva and Heine. And they write that this is a temporal phase located close before the initial boundary of the situation described by the main verb.
Je pose des... Tu sais ce que je fais comme travail là tout de suite? Je pose une journée de vacances.
Okay, I continue. So the interpretation of the perspective can be made explicit by looking at the example in one. So the ship is about to sail. This would be an English version for this construction. So the subject referent ship is in a state which precedes a future event of sailing. So it's not expressed that the ship will definitely sail, but only if nothing intervenes, the eventuality denoted by the predicate embedded within this aspectual construction might occur. So the subject referent is located in a temporal phase preceding the specific sailing eventuality. Prospective aspect is neither grammaticalized in English nor in German. So there are a number of languages which possess a grammaticalized form for the expression of prospective aspect, for example, Algonquian languages. So what is German doing to express this construction? So in German, the prospective aspect is expressed by a syntactic construction as the one shown in 2. So the relevant components of this construction highlighted are in boldface. So the interpretation of this construction is that the subject referent, Firma, company, is in a state preceding an eventuality of being handed over, or to be expressed in different words. So the subject referent is in a state which precedes a change in ownership, or a probable change in ownership. So the construction consists of the verb stehen, stand, the preposition for, in front of, and an NP complement of the preposition. So what is relevant is that neither the verb nor the preposition is used literally in this construction. And furthermore, it's relevant to mention that the verb stehen, stand, is used in its past tense form. And according to Wolfgang Klein, this is a good diagnostic to distinguish prospective aspect from future tense, since the prospective can be put in the past tense without losing its prospective meaning. The future can't. So the sentence in 2 does not describe a future event, but that the subject referent has been in the preface of an event of being handed over. So it might have never been realized. So there might have never been a change in ownership, but it sometimes in the past, the firma, the company has faced such a situation. So literally, stehen or stand is a posture verb expressing that the subject referent is spatially located in an upright posture. So the spatial location is specified by the PP complement of the verb. So in 3, the preposition for, in front of, is used in a spatial interpretation expressing that the subject referent of stehen, stand, is located within a spatial pre-region of the referent of the house. But the prospective construction in 2 is a clear case of a light verb construction, or what we in German call a Funktionsverbgefüge. So a light verb construction is a complex predicate consisting of a semantically light verb and a phrasal element. And in case of 2, stehen, so stand, is the light verb, and the phrasal element is the 4pp. And stehen, stand, is semantically light, so it's somewhat bleached but not semantically empty, as it does not contribute its full lexical content. So the sentence in 2 does not make a predication about the spatial location of the subject referent, since the noun Übergabe handing over does not denote a place. And what's also relevant is that the subject referent cannot even be in the upright poster. So there's a lot of, there are many meaning components like being located somewhere and being an upright poster, which are lost in this construction. So, but the main difference between the examples in 2 and 3 is that the verb contributes the main predicational content in the example in 3, but it does not in 2. So rather the main predicational content is contributed by the prepositional phrase in 2. And this becomes obvious by having a look at what happens if you substitute the PP internal nouns in 2 and 3 by different nouns. So if you substitute the PP internal noun house in 3 by some other noun like auto, car, so the 2 sentences basically express the same predication. It's only the spatial location of the subject referent which is changing. But if we substitute the PP internal noun in 2, so instead of Übergabe handing over, we have something like Verkauf, selling. The prospective future event is changing. So it's not anymore that the company is in front of is facing an event of change in ownership by just being handed over, but it's an event of getting sold. And there could also be other events put in there. So the 2 being handed over and being sold are quite similar, but as you can see, that's not the same, and this is the crucial aspect here. So the event is just determined by the PP internal noun. There's a lot to say about light verb constructions, and I only like to mention just one further aspect. So light verb constructions come in families. And I define the notion of a family of light verb constructions as follows. So light verb constructions form a family if they only show variance with respect to their NP element, and they exemplify the same interpretational pattern. And what is important for the current debate is that members of the same family do not vary with respect to the light verb or the prepositional element. And I mentioned the existence of such families since stehen vor light verb constructions form at least 2 different families. So the first family I like to call a prospective family, and we have already seen examples on the previous slides. And the second family I term challenge family. And an illustrative example of this family is shown in 5. So the light verb construction under discussion is vor einem Rätsel stehen. So literally this is in front of a mystery or puzzle stand. And this means something like to be confronted with a mystery or puzzle. So the subject referent is not located in the temporal preface of a mystery, but there's some specific mystery he somehow has to solve. So it's not a prospective interpretation we get in this example. So the challenge family has quite a number of members, as shown in 6, and it differs in its paraphrase from the prospective family. And so an interesting difference between the 2 types of light verb constructions, the light verb constructions of the prospective family and those of the challenge family, is that only the prospective ones license spatial modifiers like kurz, short, as temporal modifiers. So the contrast between the examples in 7, which both contain a light verb construction meaning be close to an explosion, just concerns the specification of the time interval between the subject's current state and the onset of the prospective explosion event. So in the challenge family, such modification is not licensed, which is again evidence for the fact that nouns like riddle or puzzle are not interpreted temporally. So there's no prospective interpretation in this case. And the existence of the challenge family shows one relevant aspect. Not all stehen vor light verb constructions have a prospective interpretation. A further interesting aspect is that the prospective family, or that the prospective interpretation also arises without the light verb stehen. So in 8, we have the prepositional phrase vor der Übergabe, literally in front of the handing over. And this preposition is used attributively to the subject argument. The sentence predicate is in einer schwierigen Situation, literally is in a difficult situation. Nevertheless, also the PP is used attributively. The subject referent is understood as ceding a change in ownership. So we get the very same interpretation than we get with the light verb. But in the case of 8, we need to interpolate the state in which the subject argument is. And in the light verb construction, this state is explicitly contributed by the light verb. So the light verb stehen is required for a predicative use of the prepositional phrase, but it's not just there to license this use, but it also introduces, as I already said, the state predication, which has to be interpolated in the attributive use of the prepositional phrase. So this shows us that the prospective interpretation depends on 2 components, the preposition for and the PP internal noun. And this gives rise to the question which nouns result in a prospective interpretation of this preposition. And to answer this question, I did a corpus study on the German prospective construction. And in this study, I just investigated the predicative use. So I did a corpus study on the prospective light verb constructions, consisting of the light verb stehen and prepositions headed by for. And for the corpus study, I used the German reference corpus Derico, which consists of several subcorpora. So I used the largest subcorpus W, and searched for all occurrences of inflected stehen, stand, and the preposition for, in front of, occurring in the same sentence. Since the light verb and the phrasal element do not need to be realized adjacently, but can be separated by various elements, so it's not possible to restrict the occurrence of the 2 in terms of distance. So all I had is to say, well, give me all examples where these 2 occur within the same sentence. But this search criterion gave 1.2 million hits, of which I randomly collected 10,000 sentences. So the number of 10,000 sentences is due to internal restrictions of the corpus. So you can only download 10,000 sentences. So this is why I have this number. But I think it's a rather large number. And so these 10,000 randomly collected sentences have been manually annotated by myself and my co-annotators. And we excluded 19 sentences from our analysis since they were incomplete. So all the other sentences were at least complete. So in a first annotation step, we checked whether the for PP is a complement of stehen or not. And the criterion has been, is it possible to leave out the prepositional phrase without affecting the grammaticality of the sentence? So in 6,111 sentences, the prepositional phrase has been realized as the complement of stehen, stand. In 3,870 sentences, it was some type of adjunct and not the complement of the verb. So we, in the further annotation steps, we just were looking at this 6,111 sentences. And in the next step, we checked these sentences and tested whether stehen is used as a heavy verb or not. So non-heavy verb does not necessarily mean light verb, but that's a further difficult question. So we checked whether it's heavy or not. And the test criterion was, is it possible to substitute stehen by some other posture verb like sitzen, sit, or by a more general location predicate as positioniert sein, to be positioned? And if we can do so, stehen, stand is used as a heavy verb. And this criterion is illustrated by the examples in 9. So in 9a, the sentence expresses that the family is standing in front of a bakery. And as you might expect, it's possible to substitute the verb stehen, stand, by sitzen, sit. So it doesn't matter if you are standing in front of a bakery or sitting, both is possible, without affecting the grammaticality of the sentence. Or, yeah. We could even have a more general location verb there, but I chose the more specific one. I think that's even better. So the construction in B, the light verb construction is vor der McDonaldisierung stehen, so literally in front of the McDonaldization stand, which means something like being close for turning something into a metaphorical fast food business, which I guess means something like being less individual and fast and cheap. And I think this is a quite nice example, since it illustrates that the light verb constructions of this prospective family can be creatively and productively coined. So, yeah. But the relevant aspect at this stage is that stehen, stand cannot be substituted by a different posture or even location predicate. So if we substitute it by positioniert sein, to be positioned, we get the sentence is totally odd. So we used this criterion and identified 3,222 heavy users of stehen and 2,889 non-heavy users of the verb. So in a third step, we went through the sentences containing non-heavy stehen and identified the different members of the prospective family. So we counted a combination of non-heavy stehen and the 4PP as a member of the prospective family if it has a prospective paraphrase. This was one piece of evidence. Another piece of evidence was whether we can use spatial modifiers like kurz, short as temporal modifiers. So we had different criteria to identify the members of this family. And so these test criteria gave us 306 members of the family, so 306 different tokens. And they occurred in 1,606 sentences. And what's interesting is that the majority of these light verb constructions only occur once within the analyzed sample, and just 34 occur more than 10 times. So we had 152 hapax legomena, which is a rather large number. And in general, the size of the family is rather large. So I did a previous study on a different light verb construction consisting of the light verb stehen, stand, as in this case, and the prepositional phrase headed by unter, below, or under. And in the data, also consistent, starting with 10,000 sentences, I identified 3 different families for this stehen, unter light verb constructions. And on average, each family had 26 members, so which is a totally different number, and a much smaller rate of hapax legomena, just 1 or 2. So this might be an indication that the prospective family is a productive one in difference to the other light verb construction families, which seem to be more closed sets of constructions. Okay, but I am now coming back to the central question. So which nouns are licensed within the light verb constructions of the prospective family? Or to put it differently, which nouns give rise to a prospective interpretation of stehen for light verb constructions? And in a previous analysis, I, together with my co-authors, proposed that the PP internal noun denotes a change of state. And for the previous analysis, I take this as a starting point and asking whether all of the 306 different nouns occur in this family, which occur in this family, are change of state denoting nouns or not. So in the previous studies, we modeled the compositional process of these constructions, and the data were just taken from our own intuitions. And we haven't done a corpus study. So the idea was now to substantiate this claim that the nouns are really a change of state denoting nouns. and therefore I undertook this study. So I tried to check whether all of these nouns are change of state denoting or not. As a criterion to identify change of state denoting nouns, I follow Erich and Rapp, who assume that only change of state denoting nouns are compatible with incremental adjectives like allmählich and schrittweise, both meaning gradually. So the Erich and Rapp, in their paper on German eventive nouns, said that tests for telicity and so on don't work well for eventive nouns. So that's the reason why I haven't used such a criterion. The problem with this gradually test is that it's only compatible with durative changes. So nouns denoting instantaneous changes are not easily compatible with such modifiers. Yeah. Anyway. So there are used different criterion, and I used telicity criteria in addition, but the main criterion was the use of such modifiers like allmählich, schrittweise, so gradually. So an example illustrating the combination of the noun ruin with the adjective allmählich, gradually, is shown on the slide. And what is expressed is that a gradual process of ruining started with the death of the subject referent Johannes. So applying this criterion to the individual nouns found in the family of prospective light verb constructions gave us a number of 234 change of state denoting nouns and just 72 non-change of state denoting nouns. So it seems that there's a clear preference for change of state denoting nouns to occur PP internally in prospective light verb constructions. So anyway, there's a not too small number of nouns which are not change of state denoting. And therefore, it cannot be stated, contrary to what we did in previous work, that the PP internal noun has to be change of state denoting. So which other non-change of state denoting nouns that occur in the prospective family? So I cannot present all of them, but I have a representative number of occurrences. Some of them are among the most frequent nouns occurring in this family. So a number of them is listed on the slide, and in brackets you can see the token frequency of the respective light verb constructions. So this means that the noun Krieg, war, occurred 11 times within the prospective light verb constructions in my sample. And I think, or not I think, but there's a crucial difference between the nouns in 11 and those in 12. So the nouns in 11 are state nouns, whereas those in 12 are eventive. To be more concrete, those in 12 denote processes which do not entail a change of state. So an example of prospective light verb construction containing a state noun is shown in 13. So the interpretation is that the subject referent is in a state preceding the state of being retired. So this means that the subject referent is not yet in the state denoted by the noun, and therefore entering the state requires a change of state. So there's an indirect change of state predication, I would say. And as 14 shows, it's not possible to say that one is close to retire, but in fact one already had retired. So this is contradictory. And this shows that there is really an inferred change of state in this construction. And the state noun somehow denotes a resulting state. And this is the story one can tell for all state nouns. But there's a somewhat different story to tell for the eventive but non-change of state denoting nouns. So 2 examples are shown on the slide now. So let us start with the one in 15. The light verb construction is highlighted in boldface. So vor einem Bürgerkrieg stehen, to be close to a civil war. So the meaning of the construction is that the subject referent is close to the beginning of the event denoted by the noun Krieg, war. So the construction has an inquisitive or aggressive, if you like, interpretation and can be paraphrased as being close to the beginning of the event denoted by the PP internal noun. And the same is true of the other example, which contains the light verb construction for einem Spiel stehen, literally in front of a game stand. And I think it's relevant to note that Spiel, game, just occurs in the interpretation of sports game, sports event within this construction, but it does not denote any game. So for example, you cannot use this construction to say that two children are close to start playing in the garden or something like this. So it's really a sports game, which is meant in this construction. And what makes the examples in 15 and 16 different from the other examples is that the sentence in 15 and 16 cannot be analyzed as expressing a change of state predication, since the subject referent is, if the future event finally starts, not in a different state. Instead, he is just involved in a new type of event, which started. However, my impression was that there is some difference between the examples in 15 on the one hand and those in 16 on the other. And therefore, I looked more closely on the exact realization of the nouns within the corpus data. And especially, I looked at the p-internal modifiers. And the table on the slide shows how often some of those nouns, of those non-change of state denoting nouns, although there's also one change of state denoting noun. So the table shows how often some nouns are realized with NP internal modifiers. And I have a rather broad notion of modification, including attributively used adjectives, as well as phrases, for example, PPs. But I also count occurrences of these respective nouns as the head of a compound as instances of modification. And the table shows that all types of nouns can occur modified within a prospective light verb construction. So the noun Rente, pension is not used modified, but state nouns in general can be, as the noun Notlage, desperate situation, the third on the list, indicates. So all nouns can occur modified.
You have 1 minute left.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the noun Spiel, game, only occurs in combination with a modifier. But what is more revealing is that just the number of modified occurrences is the different types of modifiers occurring in the light verb constructions. So the change of state denoting noun collapse combines with modal modifiers like possible and domain modifiers. So domain modifiers like financial specify the domain in which the noun is interpreted. The noun Krieg, war, combines with the atoma, the agent, like burger, citizen. And the noun Spiel, game, is different and combines with enumerating modifiers like first, last, or fifth, and with evaluative modifiers, which either evaluate the difficulty of the game or its relevance for the agent. And the two nouns Partie, also game, or Einsatzuse behave very much like Spiel, game. So they are also mostly used in a sports context, but the noun Einsatzuse is also used in an example reporting a prospective event of using a specific type of new weapon. And this is also the only use of this noun without a preceding modifier. Nevertheless, it's totally clear from the context that it was the very first use of this specific weapon. So I'll briefly like to show two examples of the modified noun game. So in 17, we have the superlative modifier das größte, the greatest, which characterizes the sport event as being the most important one of the current season. So not any event, but a specific relevant one for the subject argument. And in 16, we had already seen that example, the game has a special relevance for the subject reference. Here we have a numeral modifier 50s, 50s, which is used to report a kind of anniversary. So the sentence presents this game as somewhat important for the trainer. So leaving out the modifier as in 18 decreases the acceptability of the construction. So the native speakers I consulted judged the sentence being odd. And the acceptability increases if the occurrence of such a game is considered to be somehow relevant for the subject referent. But then we need a special context to indicate the relevance of this game. So this indicates that the modifiers are relevant for licensed construction. So we do not require modifiers in case of state denoting and state denoting nouns. And they are also not necessary in case of nouns like Krieg, war. So if these nouns are combined with modifiers, the modifier do not express the relevance of the state or event of the subject referent, but only specify properties of the state or event. But the modifiers used with Spiel, game, do not create a change of state interpretation, but increase the relevance, or if you like, the salience of the event. So at the moment, I do not have a clear definition of the required notion of relevance or salience, but we can see that the change of state denoting nouns express an event which affects the subject referent, since the subject referent will, if nothing intervenes, undergo the change of state. The state nouns denote a state which will result from a change of state, and therefore also expresses the effectiveness of the subject referent. And Krieg, war, is, at least intuitively seen, an event which is highly salient and potentially affects the subject referent. So even if this effect does not come in terms of a lexical entailment. Spiel, game, finally, is not intrinsically salient. And this might explain why this noun and similar nouns require this type of modification. So to conclude, the PP internal nouns shown in this construction are not restricted to change of state denoting nouns. Also, the majority of PP internal nouns denote change of state events. So it's reasonable to claim that change of state denoting nouns are at the core of this prospective construction. Not any eventuality denoting noun is licensed in this PP internal position. The denoted eventually has to be relevant, whatever this means. I have to admit that I need to work this out in more detail in future. And I like ending this talk with a further question, the speculative answer to it. So is the preference for prospective aspect to combine with change of state denoting nouns specific for German? And in the English-based Creole talk Pissin, a similar restriction is found, at least with human subject arguments. The prospective aspect construction, which makes use of a volitional verb, is restricted to change of state events. And in addition, we find very similar restrictions with another type of prospective aspect construction in German, but also in Dutch and Portuguese. You can find the structure of these constructions on the slide, but unfortunately not on the handout. So in difference to the light verb constructions I was talking about, the second construction embeds an infinitive rather than an eventive noun. And especially constructions in Dutch and Portuguese look very similar to each other. But what is most interesting is that the first results of our corpus study on these constructions reveal that the majority of infinitives occurring in these constructions are change of state denoting. So I cannot present details on the study, as me and my colleagues are still in the process of analyzing the data, but it seems that we find in these constructions the very same pattern as I observed for the prospective light verb constructions reported in this talk. So there might seem, and this is again speculative, that there is a path such that constructions expressing prospective aspects start with change of state events and then progressively extend to other types of eventualities.
Thank you very much, Jens, for this very rich talk. We have very little time left for questions. Patrick has a question.
It's rather a remark than a question. Thanks for your talk. I wanted to tell you that I've got a student who is currently working on a very similar set of construction in Romanian, and she has actually found the same sort of pattern that you actually elicited or found in your study, including it's based on the corpus study as well, and with a diachronic dimension. And she has found that the construction had evolved from. It also has a. It's a be about. It's a proximative construction. Plus a nominal in the first stage, and there were some classes of nominals only that reflect the classes you found with some extension, and then that evolved into a verbal construction with a supine form, which is a non-inflected verbal form, for which there is a further extension to other aspectal classes, and then again that reflects on what you found. Oh,
that's interesting.
And the name of the person is Beatrice Pantu, Pantu.
Oh, okay. Thanks. That's very interesting to know. It's good to know that there are also other languages having this restriction for whatever reason. So does she have an explanation for this?
She's working on it. Yes, that's part of her PhD. But she's just finished a corpus study, and she's working on the semantics of it now.
Okay, thanks.
We have time for just a very small question. John has a question.
Yeah, hi. That was really, really interesting. Just a quick comment. I'm actually working on a corpus study of middle constructions in English, where we're looking at basically very similar things to you and running into similar problems. But I'll email you about that at some point. But,
okay.
The comment I had was, have you looked the restriction you mentioned at the end about sort of like has to have some significance or whatever really reminds me of English pseudo-passives, like this bed was slept in. By George Washington, where it's been claimed in the past, I don't know the references, it's been claimed that there's a restriction. You only get them if somehow you can interpret it as being significant or generating an effect for the subject. Sleeping in any bed isn't that significant, but if it's been slept in by George Washington, then somehow, you know, that makes the bed more important or something. So it's a very similar restriction on when you get those to what you were describing. And I wonder if there's some connection or relationship or something in there that could help you sharpen the significance thing.
Yeah, that's a good remark. I will have a look at this. Yeah, thanks.